The heavy hum of machinery filled the air as Captain Luke Drayton adjusted the servos of his exosuit. The wastelands of Geron 7 spread out before him, a chaotic battlefield scared by energy blasts and torn machinery. His armor gleamed under the pale light of the twin suns, a technological marvel designed by Earth's best engineers. But Luke wore it with grim determination, knowing he was one of the few human operatives holding the line against the alien forces. He exhaled, feeling the familiar pressure against his ribs as the HUD blinked alive. Enemy movement detected. A series of yellow dots appeared on the map inside his visor, and he crouched low behind a burnt-out shuttle. Team Gamma, report. He barked through his comms. Static responded, broken by fragments of panicked voices. Captain, pinned down, requesting. Before he could respond, a brilliant arc of plasma whizzed past his head, singing the edge of his armor. Luke rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding another blast. The Azara, the alien species known for their dexterity and mastery over energy weapons, had pinned him. Their sleek blue figures moved through the battlefield like predators, agile and confident, as if they were dancing through the chaos. Luke cursed under his breath and switched the armor to tactical mode, the servos humming louder as his speed increased. Just as he stood to make a run for it, a blur of movement appeared at the corner of his eye. She landed gracefully before him. Luke froze, his heart skipping a beat. An Azara female. Her presence so unexpected it sent a jolt of confusion through him. She stood tall and proud, her deep blue skin glowing faintly in the battle's dust. Her lithe frame was draped in strange silver attire, shimmering with an elegance that seemed wildly inappropriate for combat. But it was her gaze that paralyzed him, sharp silver eyes that seemed to cut through the layers of his armor, peering directly into his soul. And then she laughed. A soft, musical sound that stood in jarring contrast to the chaos surrounding them. "Look at this poor little metal man," she purred, her voice smooth with a playful lilt. "So much armor. Are you hiding, Earthling?" She stepped closer, circling him slowly, her sharp features gleaming with mischief. Luke's fists clenched inside the gauntlets. "You got something to say, alien?" The Azara tilted her head, her silver eyes sparkling with amusement. "Do you humans fear us so much that you cower inside your precious metal shells?" She tapped the chest plate of his armor with a slender finger, the gesture mocking. "Or is this suit just an excuse to compensate for other shortcomings?" A flicker of anger and embarrassment surged through Luke, but mixed with it was something he hadn't expected: curiosity. He knew he should be focused on the mission, reporting her presence and calling for backup. Yet something about her playful taunts kept him rooted in place, his mind clouded by the bizarre allure of the moment. "What's your name?" Luke asked, his voice steadier than he felt. The alien arched a brow, her lips curving into a teasing smile. "I am Vera of the Azara. And you, little human knight?" He hesitated, debating whether to lie. "Luke," he answered, against his better judgment. "Captain Luke Drayton." Vera grinned, a sly, dangerous grin that hinted at secrets hidden beneath her playful exterior. "Well, Captain Luke, do you always let your enemies get this close, or am I just special?" Luke chuckled despite himself. "Depends. You always mock your opponents, or am I just lucky?" Her laughter rang out again, light and carefree, but this time, there was a challenge hidden beneath it, a dare Luke couldn't ignore. She stepped closer, close enough for him to catch the subtle scent of her, something floral, yet alien. It made his pulse quicken. "Why don't you step out of that armor?" Vera whispered, her voice low and tempting. "Show me what's really underneath. Or are you afraid without your technological crutch?" Luke stared at her, weighing his options. She was toying with him, that much was clear. But there was something else, something thrilling about the way she challenged him, as if she saw beyond the metal casing and wanted to glimpse the real person inside. It was reckless, it was absurd, and it was irresistible. With a deep breath, Luke reached for the release switches on his suit. What the hell am I doing? His mind screamed, but the adrenaline drowned out all logic. The exosuit hissed as the plates began to shift and retract, the bulky metal frame unfolding around him. He stepped out, clad only in the lightweight black bodysuit beneath. Vera's eyes widened slightly, genuine surprise flickering across her face for the first time. Not bad, human, she murmured, her gaze sweeping over him. Not bad at all. Luke grinned, an unfamiliar sense of exhilaration surging through him. You challenged me, remember? Now, let's see what you've got. The alien warrior's silver eyes sparkled with excitement. Bold, I like that. With a fluid motion, she dropped into a low stance, her muscles coiled like a panther ready to strike. Let's dance, Captain. Luke barely had time to react as she lunged at him, her movements faster than anything he had ever encountered. He twisted to the side, narrowly avoiding her strike, and countered with a quick jab. But Vera was already 2 steps ahead, her body moving with a grace and precision that left him breathless. They fought, not as enemies, but as equals locked in a strange, exhilarating dance. Every move, every strike, was met with a counter, the playful yet deadly exchange of skill and instinct. Luke felt alive in a way he hadn't in years, every nerve buzzing with the thrill of the fight. Not bad for a girl in fancy clothes, he quipped, ducking under one of her strikes. Vera smirked, her eyes gleaming with mischief. And not bad for a human out of his shell. The 2 warriors circled each other, their breaths ragged but their spirits high. Luke knew the battle raging around them hadn't paused. It was still chaos. Yet here, in this moment, it didn't matter. All that existed was the strange connection between him and the alien girl who had dared to challenge him. And the spark of something unexpected, something dangerous, that burned between them. And then, just as suddenly as it began, Vera stepped back, her playful smirk returning. Until next time, Captain, she whispered, and with a wink, she disappeared into the smoke and debris, leaving Luke standing there, heart pounding and mind racing. Luke stood motionless for a moment, his pulse pounding in his ears. The remnants of Vera's playful grin lingered in his mind, her whispered words wrapping around him like a spell. The battlefield continued to rage around him, but in that fleeting exchange, time had seemed to warp, slowing and intensifying everything. He clenched his jaw, snapping himself back to reality. His armor systems rebooted, and the HUD flickered back to life, drawing him back into the chaos. There was no room for distraction here. Get it together, Luke, he muttered under his breath, locking his armor's plates back into place. Yet, even as the exosuit closed around him with its familiar hum, he couldn't shake the lingering exhilaration from his encounter with Vera. He activated his comm again, cutting through static interference. Team Gamma, status report. I'm heading your way. Through the garbled noise came fragments of desperate calls. His squad was pinned down, and if he didn't move soon, they'd be overwhelmed. But just as he turned toward his comrade's position, a pulse of blue energy blasted the ground in front of him, kicking up dust and debris. Luke dove for cover, scanning his surroundings. Out of the swirling dust stepped Vera once more, but this time there was no playful grin on her face. Her silver eyes locked on his, intense and unreadable. Not so fast, human, she said, her voice lower, more urgent than before. Luke raised his pulse rifle. Back off, Vera. I don't have time for games. Vera's gaze flicked to the horizon, where the Azara forces were advancing. You don't understand. Something worse is coming. Something neither of us can fight alone. Luke's grip on his weapon tightened. And I'm supposed to trust you. You have no choice, Vera shot back, her voice sharp. Your friends are as good as dead if we keep fighting each other. If we join forces, there's a chance we can survive. For a moment, Luke's mind raced through the options. The idea of teaming up with an alien was reckless, even dangerous. But the grim reality of the battlefield left him little room for argument. If Vera was right, and he sensed she was, Then they had only minutes before the real threat arrived. Luke gritted his teeth. All right, but no funny business. The flicker of amusement returned to Vera's eyes. Wouldn't dream of it, Captain. Together, they moved through the battlefield, an unlikely duo navigating the chaos. Luke directed his squad through his comms, coordinating their retreat as Vera led him toward an area where the fighting was less intense. They sprinted side by side, dodging plasma blasts and ducking behind debris as enemy fire scorched the ground around them. Why help me? Luke asked between breaths, still struggling to make sense of the situation. Vera glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Because you're not like the others. And because if we don't work together now, none of us will leave this place alive. Her words carried a weight that Luke couldn't quite decipher, but there was no time for deeper questions. Ahead of them, a new wave of Azara soldiers advanced, their sleek forms cutting through the smoke and rubble like shadows. At the same time, Luke's HUD blared a warning. A massive heat signature was detected approaching fast. Incoming, Luke shouted, diving behind a fallen shuttle just as the ground erupted in flames. A monstrous alien creature, larger than any soldier, stormed onto the battlefield, its 6 legs thundering with each step. Its carapace shimmered with a strange, oily sheen, and a series of glowing red eyes darted in every direction. Vera cursed under her breath. It's a Raper drone. They send these things to finish what their soldiers can't. Luke peered over the wreckage, grimacing at the sight. You fought one of those before. Not personally, Vera admitted, pulling out a sleek blade that crackled with energy. But I've heard stories. We need to hit it fast and hard, or we won't stand a chance. Luke's pulse quickened. The Raper drone scanned the battlefield, targeting human and Azara forces alike. It didn't discriminate. It was here to kill everything in sight. All right, Vera, you distracted. I'll hit the core. Vera arched a brow, her lips curving into a sly smile. And here I thought humans didn't like playing fair. Let's just say I've got a few surprises, Luke replied, locking his rifle into place. On 3. Vera darted from cover, moving with the same fluid grace that had disarmed Luke earlier. The Raper's attention snapped toward her as she sprinted across the battlefield, her blade slicing through the air. It roared, its legs thundering as it charged after her. Luke took the opportunity to move, slipping around the side of the beast. His armor's targeting system locked onto the Raper's core. Glowing weak spot at the base of its spine. He raised his rifle, steadying his breath, and fired. The pulse shot hit true, sending a jolt of energy through the Raper's body. It staggered, but it didn't fall. Instead, it whirled around, its red eyes glowing brighter with rage. Damn it, Luke muttered, diving for cover as the Raper unleashed a wave of energy. The ground shook with the force of the blast, and Luke felt the heat of it even through his armor. Vera was already moving, her blade flashing as she sliced into the creature's legs. The Raper howled in fury, its movements becoming erratic as it struggled to stay upright. Luke, Vera shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Now. Without hesitation, Luke launched himself at the Raper, his armor servos humming at full power. He crashed into the beast, slamming his pulse rifle directly into the core and pulling the trigger. The shot ripped through the Raper's body, sending a cascade of sparks and energy flying in every direction. The creature let out one final, ear-piercing shriek before collapsing in a heap of smoldering metal and flesh. Luke rolled to his feet, breathing heavily, and glanced at Vera. She stood nearby, her blade still crackling with energy, a triumphant grin on her face. Not bad, Captain, she said, wiping sweat from her brow. Not bad yourself, Luke replied, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. For a moment, they stood in the aftermath of the battle, catching their breath. The battlefield was still alive with skirmishes, but for now, they had carved out a brief moment of peace. Looks like we make a good team, Luke admitted reluctantly. Vera's silver eyes sparkled, perhaps. But don't get too comfortable, human. This alliance is temporary." Luke chuckled, reloading his rifle. Wouldn't have it any other way. The battlefield had grown quiet, the aftermath of the Reaper drone's destruction leaving behind a temporary lull. Smoke drifted through the air, and the distant echoes of sporadic gunfire still reminded Luke and Vera that their fight was far from over. Luke adjusted the fit of his armor, his pulse rifle still warm in his hands. Beside him, Vera leaned on her blade, her silver eyes scanning their surroundings with a sharp, calculating gaze. "All right," Luke said, catching his breath. "What now? You've got my attention. Vera, where do we go from here?" Vera sheathed her blade, the crackling energy around it dissipating. "We move deeper into the battlefield," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "If we want any hope of making it out alive, we'll need to cut through to the command post on the other side. Your soldiers are falling back, and reinforcements won't make it in time." Luke narrowed his eyes. "And you're just helping me out of the goodness of your heart." Vera smirked, though there was no malice in it. "Let's just say I enjoy a good challenge. And besides," she met his gaze, something unspoken flickering in her eyes. "I'd rather not die today, human. And neither would you." Luke sighed. "Fair enough." He checked his comms again, though the static was louder now. Something on the battlefield was jamming their signals. The eerie silence around them was unsettling. "Lead the way, then." The two unlikely allies pushed forward, moving through the ruins and debris of the battlefield with quiet precision. Every step was a risk. Every corner they turned could lead to another ambush. Luke couldn't help but steal glances at Vera as they moved. Her movements were too smooth, too precise, like she belonged to the battlefield as much as it belonged to her. It was hard to reconcile this deadly warrior with the playful alien who had mocked him only minutes before. Yet, there was something magnetic about her. Pull Luke couldn't fully explain. A connection that defied all logic. "Don't tell me you're getting distracted already," Vera said without looking back, her voice carrying that same teasing lilt. Luke grunted. "You wish." They reached the edge of an abandoned supply depot, its metal walls scorched and crumbling. Vera raised a hand, signaling Luke to stop. "We need to be careful," she whispered. "This area is crawling with sentries." Luke scanned the area with his armor sensors, detecting multiple energy signatures lurking within the depot. Sentries. Those automated drones the Azara deploy. "Yes," Vera replied grimly. "And they've been known to shoot at anything that moves, friend or foe." Luke frowned. "Why would your own drones target you?" Vera shot him a sideways glance. "Because not every Azara likes playing by the rules, Captain. Let's just say, I've stepped on a few toes in my time." Luke couldn't help but chuckle. "You don't say." Vera rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a small smile. "Come on, human. Let's see if you're as good at sneaking as you are at flirting." Luke felt heat rise to his face beneath the helmet, but shook it off. "You sure you're not just slowing me down? Try to keep up, metal man." With that, Vera slipped into the depot, her movement so quiet that Luke found it hard to believe she was real. He followed close behind, using his armor's sensors to track the drone's patrol routes. The depot was a maze of shattered crates, destroyed vehicles, and malfunctioning equipment. Shadows shifted around them, making it difficult to distinguish between broken machinery and lurking threats. Suddenly, a faint hum echoed through the depot. A drone powering up. "Get down," Luke hissed, pulling Vera behind a rusted container just as a sentry drone glided past. It hovered in the air, its sensors scanning for any sign of movement. Luke held his breath, listening to the drone's low mechanical hum as it drifted closer. Vera's breath was warm against his neck, and for a brief moment, the chaos around them faded again, leaving only the strange tension between them. "Not bad, Captain," she whispered, her lips dangerously close to his ear. "Maybe you are good at sneaking after all." Luke smirked beneath his visor. "Told you." The drone hovered a few more seconds before turning away, its red eye blinking as it resumed its patrol. Luke and Vera remained still until it disappeared into the shadows. Then, with a shared glance, they continued their silent advance through the depot. As they approached the exit, Luke spotted a terminal glowing faintly amidst the debris. A chance to disable the sentries. "Cover me," he whispered, kneeling by the terminal and activating his suit's hacking interface. Vera crouched beside him, her blade drawn and ready. "You better be quick. We won't have long before the patrols come back." Luke's fingers flew across the interface, bypassing the alien encryption as best as he could. His suit's AI chimed softly. "Access granted." With a final keystroke, the terminal powered down, and the hum of the drones faded into silence. "Nice work," Vera whispered. "You might survive this yet." Luke grinned, but the moment of triumph was cut short by a sudden noise. A low growl, deep and menacing. From the shadows beyond the exit. Vera tensed. "That's not a sentry." Luke adjusted his grip on his rifle, his armor systems humming to life. "What is it?" Before Vera could answer, the creature emerged from the darkness. A massive four-legged predator with glowing blue veins running along its sleek, armored body. Its eyes gleamed with malevolent intelligence, and when it bared its fangs, they shimmered like energy blades. Vera's knuckles whitened around her blade. "That is a stalker." Luke's HUD flared with warnings. This was a high-level threat, the kind of enemy that even the Azara rarely deployed. "You've got to be kidding me." "Wish I was," Vera muttered. "Run or fight, Captain." Luke weighed his options, heart hammering in his chest. The stalker prowled closer, its claws scraping against the metal floor with an eerie precision. "Fight," he decided, raising his rifle. "No way this thing's taking us down." Vera grinned, her silver eyes gleaming. "Now you're speaking my language." The stalker lunged, its glowing fangs slicing through the air. Luke fired, the pulse shots lighting up the depot with bursts of energy. But the creature was fast, too fast. It dodged the blasts effortlessly, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye. Vera moved like a dancer, her blade flashing as she met the stalker's attack head-on. Sparks flew as metal clashed with energy, and the two combatants spun in a deadly waltz. Luke fired again, landing a glancing shot that sent the beast tumbling. "Keep it distracted," Vera shouted. "I'll go for the kill." Luke nodded, shifting his position and unleashing another volley of shots. The stalker roared, its focus divided between him and Vera. A fatal mistake. With a swift, graceful motion, Vera leaped onto the creature's back, driving her blade deep into its core. The stalker howled in agony, its body convulsing as the energy from Vera's weapon overloaded its systems. With one final shudder, the creature collapsed, its glowing veins dimming into darkness. Luke let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Not bad," he said, lowering his rifle. Vera wiped her blade clean, her expression unreadable. "Same to you, Captain." For a moment, they stood in the silence, side by side amidst the wreckage. And though they were still surrounded by danger, Luke felt something shift between them. An unspoken understanding forged in the heat of battle. "Let's get moving," Vera said softly, breaking the moment. "We've got a war to win." Luke nodded, reloading his rifle. "Right behind you." The air between Luke and Vera remained thick with tension as they left the depot behind, moving deeper into the war zone. The eerie calm that followed the destruction of the stalker didn't last long. Each step they took echoed in the ruins, as if the battlefield itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next explosion of chaos. Luke checked his armor systems again, his HUD still glitching from the electromagnetic interference spreading across the area. Whatever the Azara were using to jam communications was growing stronger. His comms with Team Gamma had gone silent, and time was running out. "Vera, what exactly are we walking into?" Luke asked, his tone sharp. "If I'm putting my life in your hands, I need more than cryptic warnings." Vera didn't look back as she spoke, her voice steady. "It's worse than you think, Captain. The drones and soldiers are only part of it. The Azara command issued an order to deploy something experimental. Luke frowned. Experimental how? Vera hesitated. The first sign of uncertainty Luke had seen from her. It's called a Nexus Core, a weapon powered by an artificial intelligence so advanced it can outthink entire armies. Once it activates, it won't stop until everything on this battlefield is reduced to ash. Cold chill ran down Luke's spine. So, you dragged me along because you think I can help shut it down. That, and Vera's lips curled into a half-smile. I figured I'd rather have you around if things go south. Flattered, Luke muttered, his grip tightening on his rifle. They continued through the shattered landscape, the ground beneath them trembling occasionally as distant battles raged. Luke could feel the tension between them shift. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was something bigger, more dangerous. And for better or worse, Vera seemed to trust him enough to share it. The terrain ahead dipped into a shallow valley, littered with wreckage and collapsed structures. Luke's HUD flickered as it scanned the area, picking up faint energy readings. We're close, aren't we? He asked. Vera nodded. The Nexus Core is buried somewhere beneath this valley. We need to get in, disable it, and get out before it activates. Luke sighed. Sounds easy enough. Don't jinx it, Vera muttered, scanning the landscape with her sharp silver eyes. As they descended into the valley, a low hum began to vibrate through the air, growing louder with every step. Luke's skin prickled under his armor. The sound wasn't just mechanical. It was alive. Then, without warning, the ground trembled violently, and a massive crack split the earth before them. From the depths of the fissure rose a towering machine, a spider-like construct, its limbs crackling with energy. At the center of its metallic body, a glowing core pulsed with malevolent intent. The Nexus Core, Vera whispered, her voice filled with dread. It's waking up. Luke aimed his rifle, heart pounding. We need to hit it now, before it fully powers on. Vera shook her head. It's too late for that. The Nexus has already locked onto us. The machine's glowing red eyes fixed on them, and with a metallic screech, it launched itself forward, its limbs slamming into the ground with bone-rattling force. Move, Vera shouted, grabbing Luke's arm and pulling him to the side just as one of the Nexus's limbs crashed down where they had been standing. They rolled to safety behind a chunk of fallen debris, their breaths ragged. Luke peeked over the edge, his mind racing. How do we stop this thing? Vera unsheathed her blade, her expression grim. We hit the core, but we'll need to work together, distract it, draw its fire. It's not just a machine. It learns from everything we do. Great, Luke muttered. Killing machine with a learning curve. The Nexus Core whirred, its red eyes glowing brighter as it scanned the area. Luke knew they didn't have long before it adjusted its tactics. All right, I'll draw its attention, he said, locking his rifle into place. You go for the core when I give the signal. Vera gave him a sharp nod, her silver eyes gleaming. Just try not to get yourself killed, Captain. Luke grinned beneath his helmet. No promises. With that, he launched himself from cover, firing a series of pulse shots directly at the Nexus Core sensors. The blasts lit up the battlefield, and the Nexus screeched in fury, its attention locking onto him. Come on, you oversized toaster, Luke shouted, dodging as the machine's limbs slammed into the ground around him. You want me? Come and get me. The Nexus lunged after him, its limbs carving deep trenches into the earth. Luke sprinted across the battlefield, narrowly avoiding the deadly strikes. His armor's servos whined in protest, but he pushed it to its limits, knowing every second he stayed alive gave Vera the chance she needed. Now, Vera, he shouted through the comms. In a blur of motion, Vera leaped from the shadows, her blade gleaming with energy. She moved with inhuman speed, dodging the Nexus's limbs as she closed the distance. With a powerful thrust, she drove her blade deep into the Nexus Core. The machine shuddered, its limbs convulsing as sparks flew from its body. The glow of its core flickered wildly, as if it was trying to fight back even in its final moments. "Luke, now!" Vera shouted, holding her blade steady as the Nexus began to power down. Luke didn't hesitate. He aimed his rifle at the core and fired a final pulse shot, the blast striking the heart of the machine with pinpoint precision. The Nexus let out a deafening screech, its limbs collapsing as the light in its core dimmed to nothing. With a final, shuddering groan, the machine crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Vera stepped back, breathing heavily. That was too close. Luke lowered his rifle, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. "You think?" They stood in silence for a moment, the echoes of battle fading around them. The Nexus was dead, but Luke knew their fight wasn't over. Somewhere beyond the valley, the war still raged, and their unlikely alliance would be tested again. Vera glanced at him, a sly grin tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Not bad, Captain. Maybe humans aren't as slow as I thought." Luke chuckled, shaking his head. "And maybe Azara aren't all smug show-offs." Vera smirked, her silver eyes gleaming with amusement. "Careful, Captain. You might start liking me." Luke grinned. "Who says I don't already?" For a brief moment, the tension between them softened, replaced by something warmer, an unspoken connection forged in the heat of battle. But before Luke could say anything more, Vera's expression turned serious. "We need to move," she said quietly. "This isn't over yet." Luke nodded, reloading his rifle. "Lead the way." Luke followed Vera deeper into the battlefield. The air between them charged with tension. The Nexus core was destroyed, but both knew the hardest part still lay ahead. The war continued to rage, and they were far from safety. As they crossed the valley and entered the outskirts of an abandoned Azara command station, Luke's senses remained on high alert. Something felt off. Vera led the way with precision, but Luke couldn't shake the uneasy feeling crawling up his spine. The further they moved from the Nexus site, the more the silence pressed on them. "Why isn't anyone pursuing us?" Luke muttered, scanning the surroundings through his HUD. "Your people just gave up." Vera glanced at him, but didn't respond immediately, her silver eyes flicking around the empty corridors of the abandoned structure. "The Nexus was supposed to be our failsafe," she finally said. "With it destroyed, they may be regrouping for a bigger offensive." Luke grunted in acknowledgement, but the answer didn't sit right with him. His gut told him there was something Vera wasn't saying. Or maybe they're waiting for us to walk into a trap. Vera gave him a sly smirk. "Paranoid, Captain." Luke shook his head. "No, just experienced." They advanced further into the station, the metal walls around them scorched and cracked from previous battles. Luke's armor systems were glitching again, distorted by interference. Whether from lingering Azara tech or something else, he couldn't tell. "Where exactly are we going?" Luke asked, his patience wearing thin. "To the station's power core," Vera answered, her tone curt. "If we can overload it, we might be able to cripple their forces in the area and cut off their reinforcements." Luke narrowed his eyes, his instincts still on edge. "And you didn't think to mention this plan earlier?" Vera shrugged. "You didn't ask." Luke clenched his fists but let it go. He needed to keep his head clear. Whatever Vera was planning, he had to be ready for anything. They reached the heart of the station, a massive chamber filled with flickering consoles and power conduits humming with unstable energy. Vera moved quickly, her fingers flying across the alien interfaces as she activated the control panel. "Almost there," she muttered under her breath. Luke kept his rifle raised, scanning the room. His nerves screamed at him to stay alert, but just as he was about to speak, the door behind them slammed shut with a heavy clang. Luke spun around, aiming his rifle at the sealed entrance. What the hell was that? Vera didn't look up from the console, her voice unusually calm. "Just a precaution." Luke's heart sank as the pieces began to click into place. "What are you doing, Vera?" She sighed, finally turning to face him. "You're sharp, Captain. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this." Luke's grip tightened on his rifle. "Come to what?" Vera's silver eyes gleamed with regret, and something colder. The Nexus core wasn't just a weapon. It was a safeguard to ensure no human forces breached this station. Now that it's gone, the command wants this facility back under control. And she hesitated, her expression flickering with guilt. "I have my orders." Luke felt the betrayal hit like a punch to the gut. "You used me." Vera's gaze didn't waver, but there was a flicker of something softer beneath the steel. "I needed your help to destroy the Nexus. I couldn't have done it alone." Luke's mind raced, weighing his options. His pulse rifle was still aimed at her, but despite the rage simmering inside him, part of him hesitated. Something about Vera's expression, the way she looked at him, as if this was hurting her too, made it harder to pull the trigger. "Don't make me regret trusting you, Vera," Luke warned, his voice low. Vera exhaled slowly. "I didn't want it to end this way, Captain. But my people, they'll be here soon. If you run now, you might make it out alive." Luke didn't lower his rifle. "And what happens to you?" Vera's lips curled into a bittersweet smile. "I stay. They think I betrayed them by working with you. Need to make this right." Luke shook his head, frustration boiling over. "You don't have to do this, Vera. There's another way." Vera's expression softened for a brief moment, a flicker of vulnerability that made Luke's chest tighten. "You'll understand. This isn't just about survival, Luke. It's about loyalty. Honor." The sound of distant footsteps echoed through the corridor, growing louder with every second. Vera glanced toward the door, her silver eyes dimming with sadness. "Go, now, before it's too late." Luke's mind raced, his instincts screaming at him to run. But something held him back, a stubborn part of him that refused to abandon the strange connection they had forged. "You can still come with me," Luke said, his voice firm. "We fight them together." Vera shook her head slowly. "If I leave with you, I'll be hunted for the rest of my life. And so will you." "I've fought worse," Luke replied, taking a step closer. For a heartbeat, Vera seemed to waver, but then the door behind them hissed open, and a squad of Azara soldiers stormed in, their weapons raised. Luke moved without thinking. He grabbed Vera's hand and yanked her toward the opposite exit. "We're not done yet." "Luke," Vera started, but he cut her off. "No time to argue," he snapped. "We fight or we die. Your choice." Vera hesitated for only a second before nodding, her silver eyes flashing with determination. "All right, Captain. Let's see how fast you really are." Together, they sprinted through the station, pulse shots and plasma blasts chasing after them. The Azara soldiers pursued relentlessly, but Luke and Vera moved like shadows, ducking and weaving through the wreckage. "This way," Vera shouted, leading them down a narrow corridor that opened into a hangar bay. Luke's eyes widened as he spotted a sleek, alien transport ship waiting on the other side. "You had a way out this whole time." Vera grinned, her breath coming in short bursts. "I always have a backup plan." They raced toward the ship, dodging fire from the soldiers closing in behind them. Just as they reached the ramp, Luke spun around, unleashing a barrage of shots to cover their escape. "Go, go," he shouted, shoving Vera toward the controls. She leaped into the pilot's seat, her fingers flying over the console as the engines roared to life. Luke dove into the cockpit just as the ship lifted off, narrowly avoiding the plasma fire trailing behind them. As the ship shot into the sky, Luke collapsed into the seat beside Vera, his chest heaving. "Nice save, Captain," Vera said, her silver eyes gleaming with amusement. Luke chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Don't get used to it." Vera's grin widened. "Who says I won't?" The two of them exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They had survived the impossible, together. But the war wasn't over, and whatever lay ahead, They would face it side by side. The alien transport ship cut through the sky like a blade, engines humming as Vera piloted with unmatched precision. Luke sat in the co-pilot's seat, his pulse finally slowing. The adrenaline that had fueled their escape ebbed, leaving behind exhaustion and more questions than answers. "All right, Vera," Luke said, strapping himself into the seat as the ship leveled out. "We made it. Now tell me what's really going on. Why risk everything to help me? Why not turn me in when you had the chance?" Vera kept her hands steady on the controls, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Luke thought she wouldn't answer. But then, without looking at him, she spoke. "There's more to this war than you know, Captain. The Nexus Corps, the soldiers, even my orders. None of it matters." She hesitated, her silver eyes flicking toward the stars beyond the windshield. "This isn't just a war for territory. It's a war for control over the future." Luke frowned. "What do you mean?" Vera exhaled, her gaze hardening. "The Azara leadership doesn't believe humanity belongs in the galaxy. They see you as unpredictable, too chaotic. They want control, stability, something humans will never give them." Luke let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, well, we've always been good at breaking things." Vera glanced at him, the ghost of a smile on her lips. "Exactly, and that scares them. So they engineered this war not to conquer you, but to keep you contained." The weight of her words settled over Luke like a lee blanket. "And you don't agree with them?" Vera shook her head. "No. I think there's more to your kind than they understand. You're unpredictable, yes. But you're also adaptable and brave." Her gaze softened slightly. "That's why I helped you. I wanted to see for myself if you were worth the risk." Luke leaned back, absorbing her words. For a long time, neither of them spoke, the hum of the ship's engines filling the silence. Finally, Luke broke the quiet. "So what now? We're fugitives from both sides." Vera gave a small shrug, though the glimmer in her silver eyes betrayed her amusement. "Looks that way." Luke chuckled. "I've had worse odds." Vera smiled. A real, genuine smile. "I knew I liked you, Captain." But just as the moment of peace settled between them, the ship's console began flashing red. Vera's smile vanished, replaced by grim focus. "Tracking signal," she muttered. "They found us." Luke tensed. "How fast can they catch up?" "Faster than I'd like," Vera replied, adjusting the ship's trajectory. "But we have one last option." Luke glanced at the star map on the console. "And that is?" Vera pointed to a distant system, the edges marked with warnings. "There's a relay station on the far side of that sector. If we can reach it, we can disable the tracking signal and vanish." Luke raised an eyebrow. "And the catch?" Vera grinned. "It's a restricted sector, full of black holes, rogue asteroids, and things even I don't want to name." Luke let out a long breath, checking his rifle. "Sounds fun. Let's do it." The ship hurtled through the stars, dodging asteroid fields and collapsing stars as Vera pushed the engines to their limits. Luke could feel the tension building. Every second counted, and the enemy ships were closing fast. "Hold on," Vera shouted, banking the ship hard as they slipped through a narrow gap between two massive asteroids. Luke gripped the console, his heart in his throat. "You call this flying?" Vera grinned despite the danger. "Relax, Captain. You're in good hands." The relay station loomed ahead, an ancient structure floating at the edge of a swirling black hole. Its lights flickered weakly, as if forgotten by the rest of the galaxy. "We have one shot at this," Vera said, her tone serious. "If the system's still online, I can kill the tracking beacon. If not, we improvise." Luke finished for her, his pulse steady despite the odds. The ship docked with a shuddering thud, and Luke and Vera sprinted into the relay station. The air was cold, the station eerily quiet. Vera moved quickly to the control terminal, her fingers flying over the ancient interface. Luke kept his rifle raised, scanning the dark corridors for signs of pursuit. "How much time do we have?" "Not much," Vera muttered. "They'll be here any minute." Just as she spoke, the lights in the station flickered, and the doors hissed open. Luke whirled around, aiming his rifle as a squad of Azara soldiers poured into the station. "Vera!" Luke shouted, unleashing a volley of shots. "Whatever you're doing, do it fast." Vera cursed under her breath, frantically working the controls. Almost there. The firefight was brutal, the narrow corridors amplifying every blast. Luke moved with precision, his armor absorbing most of the hits, but the soldiers kept coming. He could feel his strength waning, every shot taking more effort than the last. "Got it," Vera shouted suddenly, slamming her hand on the console. The relay station hummed to life, and the tracking signal blinked out. Luke grinned, adrenaline surging through him. Time to go. They sprinted back to the ship, dodging plasma fire as they boarded. The engines roared to life, and Vera punched the throttle. The ship shot away from the station, narrowly avoiding the pursuing Azara forces. As they slipped into the blackness of space, the enemy ships vanished from their sensors. "We're clear," Vera said, exhaling in relief. Luke leaned back in his seat, his heart still pounding. That was close. Vera glanced at him, her silver eyes gleaming with something warmer than before. "You did good, Captain." Luke smirked. "Told you I'm full of surprises." Vera chuckled, and for the first time since the battle began, the tension between them eased. They were free. Fugitives, perhaps, but free. "So," Luke said, tilting his head toward the star map, "where to next?" Vera's smile was mischievous. "Anywhere but here, Captain. The galaxy's wide open." Luke grinned, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Let's see where the stars take us." And with that, they set a course for the unknown, two unlikely allies bound by danger, trust, and the endless possibilities of the cosmos.